What if I told you there's a novel so brutally honest about patriarchal society that it was banned in its own country for 11 years? A story that makes your most dysfunctional family gathering look like a peaceful Sunday dinner. Today, we're diving into a tale of repudiation, rebellion, and religious hypocrisy that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family, faith, and freedom. Let me paint you a picture. It's Algeria, and we're about to meet Si Zoubir, a 50-year-old religious patriarch who decides his life needs some spice. His solution? Marry 15-year-old Zoubida, because apparently, when you're having a midlife crisis in a patriarchal society, you don't buy a sports car, you buy a child bride. Our story unfolds through the eyes of Rashid, Si Zoubir's son, who's recounting his traumatic childhood to his French girlfriend Céline. And trust me, this isn't your typical difficult upbringing story. This is more like how to psychologically destroy multiple generations in one household. The setting is a traditional compound where everyone lives together. Sons, daughters, husbands, wives, cousins, nephews, aunts, uncles, grandparents, all under the iron fist of the patriarch. Imagine the worst reality TV show you can think of. Remove the cameras, add religious extremism, and multiply the dysfunction by 1,000. That's the world Rashid grows up in. Now, in this delightful household, women have exactly one right. Let me quote Rashid directly.
"My mother is a repudiated woman. She reaches orgasm alone, with her hand or the help of Nana. In our city, the number of marabouts is constantly increasing. We live in feudal society. Women have only one right: to own and maintain a sexual organ."
Think about that for a moment. Not to use it, just to own and maintain it. It's like being given a Ferrari, but only being allowed to wash it in the driveway while someone else drives it around town. The system is so twisted that these sexually starved women become what Rashid describes as starving nymphomaniacs, finding release alone or with each other, while their husbands patronize brothels in the shadowy corners of town. Meanwhile, the religious restrictions are so severe that women can't even leave the compound without the patriarch's permission. So what happens when you trap a bunch of sexually frustrated teenagers together with nowhere to go? Well, the family tree gets significantly more complicated. Cousins start looking mighty attractive when they're literally the only available option, and keeping it in the family takes on a disturbing new meaning. But it gets worse. The marriage system itself is absolutely barbaric. Here's how one character describes the economic reality.
"Later, I understood it was poverty driving the Talib to homosexuality, since getting married in our city is extremely expensive. Women are sold in public squares, chained to the cows, and brothels are inaccessible to small purses."
Yes, you heard that right. Women are literally sold alongside livestock in public squares. Nothing says romance quite like a cattle auction, right? It's capitalism meets human trafficking with a side of animal husbandry. Now, Rashid and his brother Zahir are watching all this unfold, trying to reconcile their father's religious preaching with his actual behavior. It's like being lectured about honesty by a compulsive liar while he's actively lying to your face. The psychological damage is devastating. The breaking point comes when both brothers completely reject everything they've been raised to believe. Here's Rashid describing that moment.
"Let father continue straining over the smooth body of his young wife. He would never again be left in peace. Traps, I swore aloud, denied God, religion, and women. Zahir hated the tribe and pissed in the water used for the ablutions of the holy men and the Quran readers."
Talk about making a statement. Zahir literally contaminates the holy water while Rashid simultaneously rejects God, religion, and women all in one breath. It's rebellion on an epic scale. Zahir, who happens to be homosexual, eventually takes to alcohol and dies in exile with his lover, Hypocrisy, an atheistic Jewish man who calls the Bible a beautiful poem ever written by man. The same pious adults who vilify Zahir for his sexuality are, ironically, the ones sexually molesting young boys and girls. The hypocrisy is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Meanwhile, Si Zoubir himself doesn't escape the madness he's created. Facing increasingly unstable children who've become sexually predatory toward young women in the compound, our patriarch becomes paranoid and psychotic, beating his children at every opportunity and accusing them of plotting to kill him and his unborn child. The author doesn't spare any aspect of this society from his scathing critique. Even the celebrations are disasters. At Si Zoubir's wedding to Zoubida, the poor and rejected blind men, cripples, beggars gorge themselves on free food until they're literally defecating where they eat, turning the feast into what can only be described as unsightly putrefaction. The religious festival of Eid gets similar treatment, with the community engulfed in, well, a cocoon of pungent smell of blood and dung of slaughtered animals. Young boys are expected to prove their bravery by calmly watching the slaughter, because apparently nothing builds character like childhood trauma. And here's the final insult. When some of the younger generation finally tries to stand up to the religious fanatics who've influenced the post-independence government, they're promptly arrested and jailed, because heaven forbid anyone challenge this beautiful system of oppression. This incredible, disturbing, and absolutely necessary story is Repudiation by Rashid Boudjedra, originally published in 1969. And yes, this book was so controversial that Algeria banned it for 11 years, from 1969 to 1980. That should tell you something about how effectively it exposes uncomfortable truths.
Damn!
What makes Repudiation so powerful isn't just its unflinching portrayal of patriarchal oppression. It's the brilliant way Boudjedra structures his critique. He starts at the micro level with the family and gradually expands outward, showing how these same patterns of repudiation, oppression, and hypocrisy scale up from the household to the community to the nation itself. The concept of repudiation runs through every layer of the story like a virus. At the family level, we see husbands repudiating their wives, not divorcing them, which would at least free them, but simply abandoning them sexually and emotionally while taking new wives. The original wives remain trapped in limbo, unable to remarry, unable to move on, still under patriarchal control. It's a system designed to maximize female suffering while protecting male privilege. The children repudiate religion after witnessing the massive chasm between what's preached and what's practiced. Society repudiates its own youth when they dare to challenge the system. And ultimately, Boudjedra suggests that the only path to redemption is the complete repudiation of the religious structures that enable this oppression. His comparison of different quarters of the city is particularly striking. He argues that the level of social rot decreases as you move from the Muslim quarters to the Jewish quarters to the European quarters, suggesting that less religious control equals healthier societies. Now, I have some issues with this conclusion. While the critique of religious patriarchy is absolutely spot on, the implicit endorsement of European colonialism through omission is problematic. Boudjedra seems to suggest that European capitalism is superior simply because it's less overtly religious. But this ignores how colonialism and capitalism create their own brutal forms of oppression and exploitation. The narrative style deserves mention too. Using long, flowing sentences punctuated by sharp, shorter ones, Boudjedra creates a rhythm that's both philosophical and poetic. The unreliable narrator, Rashid struggling with fading memories while telling his story to his French girlfriend, adds another layer of complexity to an already intricate tale. What strikes me most is the book's unflinching honesty about how patriarchal systems damage everyone involved. Yes, women suffer enormously, but the children are psychologically destroyed, and even the patriarchs themselves become paranoid and unstable. It's a system that devours its own creators. Rashid Boudjedra was born in 1941 in eastern Algeria, and his background illuminates much about this book's perspective. Educated in Tunisia at the elite Lycée Sadiki, he encountered both Arab and Western cultures early on. He later studied philosophy at the Sorbonne in Paris, which explains the book's philosophical depth and analytical rigor. Fascinatingly, after publishing 6 novels in French in 1981, Boudjedra switched to writing in Arabic, then returned to French in the mid-1990s. This linguistic journey reflects the complex cultural position of many North African intellectuals, caught between colonial languages and indigenous ones, between traditional and modern worldviews. Repudiation was his debut novel and won the Prix des Enfants Terribles, funded by Jean Cocteau. More importantly, it established Boudjedra as a voice willing to challenge official narratives and expose uncomfortable truths about post-independence Algeria. Boudjedra's stated mission is to question the official Algerian interpretation of history and uncover its contradictions. This book certainly achieves that, tearing away what he calls the shiny foil to expose the rot beneath. His unflinching examination of how societies can become monstrous while maintaining civilized facades reminds me of José Saramago's blindness. Repudiation is not an easy read. It's disturbing, uncomfortable, and at times genuinely horrifying, but it's also absolutely necessary. In our current moment, when patriarchal authoritarianism is rising globally and religious fundamentalism is being weaponized to justify oppression, this book feels startlingly, urgently relevant. Boudjedra shows us what happens when religious authority goes unchecked, when patriarchal power becomes absolute, when women are treated as property rather than people. He reveals the devastating psychological cost of hypocrisy, how lies and oppression corrupt not just the oppressed, but the oppressors themselves. Is the book perfect? No. The implicit colonial bias in its conclusion is troubling, and focusing solely on religion as the source of oppression ignores other systems of power and control. But as a searing critique of patriarchal religious authority, as a psychological study of trauma and resistance, as a piece of literary art that refuses to look away from difficult truths, it's remarkable. This is literature as a weapon. The kind of book that gets banned precisely because it tells truths that power structures desperately want to keep hidden. It's the kind of book that generates discussion, debate, and hopefully, change. The writing itself flows between the philosophical and the poetic, creating what Boudjedra calls a narrative that exposes the putrefaction beneath society's shiny surface. Through Rashid's unreliable narration, we get not just a story, but a psychological excavation of trauma, resistance, and the long shadow cast by oppressive systems. So yes, I absolutely recommend Repudiation. But come prepared, this isn't comfort reading. This is literature as a mirror, reflecting back the worst of what we're capable of in the hope that we might choose to be better. It's a book that will stay with you long after you close it, challenging you to examine the systems of power and oppression in your own world. What do you think? Have you read Repudiation? How do you see its themes playing out in our current moment? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more reviews of challenging, important literature that refuses to pull its punches. Hey, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. If you're interested in diving deeper into this book, I've left some links down in the description. You can use it to grab yourself a copy and keep the adventure going. And if you're in the mood for more great reads, don't go just yet. Click on one of the videos popping up right now that I think you'll love. And don't forget to give this review a like, leave a comment, or even subscribe if you'd like to see more. Every bit of support helps us grow this little community of book lovers. See you in the next one.